Well, much of what the government does from here on in will have at least a tinge of green. The Greens are a serious political and possibly economic force. The member for Melbourne, Adam Bandt, is the Greens spokesman on industry, banks and some parts of business. He joins me now from Canberra. Adam Bandt, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Philip.
Well, just firstly, on today's discussion, what do you think of a $23 a tonne carbon price? Because that's the word.
Well, I think on Sunday the full package will be revealed, and one of the things that we've always said as the Greens is that just as important as the price and the rate at which it rises is what measures there are going to be taken to accelerate the development of clean technology industry in Australia. I mean, it's the points that were made in that package just then are spot on. The former member for Melbourne, former Finance Minister Lindsay Tanner, said a key question for the country has got to be what is Australia going to sell the rest of the world in 15 years' time? And on current policy settings from Labor and the Coalition, the answer's probably got to be coal, and we're on track to overtake Saudi Arabia as the world's largest exporter of fossil fuels. And I think it's a loser's game, and our comparative advantages are in the science field, are in technology and in innovation, and it's exactly that we should be boosting so that we're leading the world in renewable energy technologies, and that to me is as important as what the dollar figure of a price per tonne of carbon is.
But of course, the other issue with this is that the carbon tax is going to be imposed on a smaller group of companies. It's hardly going to act as a disincentive for a much larger group of companies, obviously, and that seems like a bit of a cop-out for the Greens to be accepting this. It's a very small tax base, isn't it?
Well, there's a number of questions there. One is the coverage of the scheme, and again, that'll be revealed on Sunday. It's obviously been announced that petrol's out. That's not our preference as the Greens, but this exercise involved trying to land two political parties and two independents on the same page for one of the biggest economic and environmental reforms that this country has seen. And if in the course of that there has to be give and take, then so be it. What's got to be critical about the design of the scheme, though, is that it provides a platform for upward flexibility. I mean, when superannuation was introduced, it might not have been at the level that some people wanted, but it's there in a way that enables us to ratchet it up as it becomes as it becomes more affordable. And so in this instance, as long as there's capacity for upward flexibility as technologies become cheaper, as the rest of the world moves, that's a critical element of the design too.
Okay, well, everybody's also talking about the complexity of this regime because even the government is having a few problems in explaining how it will affect different parts of different businesses, small and large. That looks like it's shaping up as an administrative nightmare for business, doesn't it?
Oh, look, I think on the contrary, I think it's widely recognised that it's one of the most simple and efficient ways of going about the problem of tackling climate change. I mean, from our perspective, it's necessary but not sufficient to put a price on pollution. It's going to help us start the transition and help Australia join that clean energy race that those others were speaking about before. But I think at heart, it's a very simple proposition that polluters who up till now have been putting pollution into the atmosphere that we've presumed was free, but we now know it comes at an enormous cost, are going to have to pay some of that cost, and the revenue raised goes to assist other sections of industry to transition and to assist householders. So I think it's actually, and economists say, it's one of the simpler schemes you could implement.
And as far as the Greens also support the Senate inquiry into foreign purchases of agricultural land and Australian agri-businesses, I presume you want to see a ban on foreign ownership in that sector?
Well, we need to have the discussion about it. Similarly with the foreign ownership of mining, a sector that's 83% foreign owned. I think that when we have resources like land and like our minerals that belong to the Australian people, and in some instances, for example, with minerals, we only get to dig them up and sell them once, and we know on current assessment, for example, that iron ore, there's 25 years worth of it left in terms of what we know about current deposits. I think we need to have the discussion about how much of it should be able to be owned within Australia and how much not, and what the appropriate taxation regime for it is, because these are things that in some instances we only get to sell them once, and we need to get a proper return from the revenue. We need to have proper security, for example, especially in an era of food security challenges, and I think it's legitimate to have that debate.
But wouldn't that invite retaliation? Doesn't that invite criticism from our trading partners and foreign investors?
Well, I think we can have the discussion sensibly. I mean, we have a free trade agreement, so-called free trade agreement, with trading partners like the United States, and in the United States they continue to heavily subsidise and protect their local industries, and we sign up to these agreements that in many instances leave us powerless. I don't think that simply wanting to control and have a meaningful say over the resources that we've got is necessarily going to invite retaliation.
And as far as competition's concerned, any sort of monopolies you see and oligopolies abusing their power, as you say, you'd want to see them dismantled, is that right?
Well, I think that there's a really important role for the ACCC to play if it has some teeth. For example, we'd like to see it be given divestiture powers, and also looking at milk, for example, recently there's a real pressing need to reintroduce the anti-price discrimination provisions and to give the ACCC some real teeth. But in other sectors, so for example in banking, I think that yes, competition is important, but I think we can get, Labor and the Coalition certainly can sometimes get a bit hung up on that competition mantra and sometimes believe their own hype. I think in the banking sector, for example, we should call a spade and accept that we have a de facto too big to fail policy for the big four banks. We should acknowledge that, and we should ask them to pay an appropriate levy for the amount of support we get.
All right, Adam Bandt, thanks for your time. We're going to have to leave it there.
Thanks very much.